women who end up in the C-suite are often so battered that they can't necessarily articulate their experience. It's gonna take a while for us to really get the reality put down, because a lot of these women, they follow the never complain, never explain thing. You know, I mean, look at the alleged CEO of Twitter. Like that, there's somebody apparently with power. You know, CEO. She doesn't have any power. What's her name? Linda.
I don't know.
I'll look it up. But that we don't even know her name.
Yeah.
You
No,
know?
it's I didn't even know, like, I knew he had announced
Yeah.
that there was
Linda Yaccarino is her name.
yeah,
Yeah.
I knew he had announced a woman. I never knew when the exchange of power was. Everything still comes through him every
Yeah.
few weeks. It's oh god, I almost had a breakdown the other day when he announced because it's like my Twitter reach has
Yeah.
just plummeted recently.
Oh, Twitter's shit now.
And it's like Twitter is the only place I get any interaction on social media. Guys, I'm on Instagram and Blue Sky and Threads and a bunch of other places, including Facebook. So if you want to go follow me there, that would make my day.
Yeah, Blue Sky's been kind of fun, I admit. But I mean, like, Linda Yaccarino, she was the chairman of the World Economic Forum's task force on the future of work. And she is basically being humiliated daily by Elon Musk right now.
Oh yeah.
And that's like, I want to know eventually how that happened, because I hope she's making a lot of money. Like, the only acceptable thing is she's just trying to make enough money that she can retire on, because she doesn't want to do this anymore, so she's not expecting to get another job. Because he put a woman in a position where it seemed she had power, but she doesn't. He's making the decisions that CEOs should be consulting on, because he's making business decisions, not just technology decisions.
And here's the thing, even over on Threads, and like Threads is kind of, that was a brief explosion. We'll see.
Yeah, they've got to get more features.
Yeah. But even over there, it's not Zuckerberg making announcements. It's the guy who's actually in charge of Threads.
Right.
Who puts out updates and says, hey, this is what we're working on. And now there's an official Threads account. So more of it is coming from there. Yeah. But it's like that would make more sense.
Well, I mean, Twitter is you go to any meeting now about monetizing web content, and Twitter is worthless now.
Oh yeah.
That way, you can still connect to people, you can still have conversations, but in terms of a metric that anybody cares about, Twitter's toast. Unfortunately, it's still Facebook and Instagram, and I hate those platforms.
Yeah.
But I might start the issue is, when we get into leadership and criticism, the way people speak to women who are running things are extremely different than the way people speak to men. And people argue me on this, and I don't care what anyone says. It's different. They try to appeal to your softness in a position that's the wrong call. And then they turn it around on you when you're not. And this has happened to me again and again and again, and we need to talk about it.
Every time I see and like, here's the thing. I think you are someone who cares deeply. But
Yeah.
every time I see someone try to appeal to you under like, I think underneath all that, you're really,
You're
I don't,
much more vulnerable than you pretend to be.
and I'm sitting there going, no. It's like,
Yeah.
obviously I'm not saying like, oh, you're tough and mean. No,
No.
you are one of the
But
most genuine people I know.
but would they say that to a man? Absolutely fucking not.
No.
No one would go up to a guy, trying to persuade them and go, "You're much more vulnerable and emotional than you pretend to be." I think a lot of guys would like that in certain circumstances, but people don't talk to men that way.
No.
And this is something that isn't getting addressed in these girl boss shows. The only one that came even remotely close to it was Once Upon a Time. They botched it,
Yeah.
but they, you know, um there's a show on called Yellow Jackets, which I know you can't watch, but
Yeah.
they get into sort of it's a female Lord of the Flies mixed with kind of a lost present day, or allegedly, with flashbacks.
Mm-hmm.
And they show how, girl authority structures form and the sort of mystic elements that it takes on, and it's quite well done, except they're getting into that thing where they're now, they in season 2 they started adding to the flashbacks, and it's pretty clear they didn't know that detail season 1, so
Mm-hmm.
they couldn't include that in the present day. That's the problem with doing shows of that format.
Okay, I just want to say really quick, Only Murders in the Building, which we've both been watching.
Yes.
that doesn't have an A-B plot
No.
like with flashbacks.
Yeah.
But the way the first 2 seasons especially were woven together,
Yeah.
with everything being connected, and like the season 2 case was teased in the very opening moments of season 1.
Yeah.
That is such a relief.
Yes.
For me. Like, I think I even texted you. I'm like, do they maybe, gasp, have a 5-year plan?
Yeah, like
And
they
it's like,
have an idea.
Yeah, it's like they know what they're doing, and things are actually at least somewhat planned out. Like, I don't know if season 3 was as woven into, I don't think it was as woven into 2 as 2 was into 1, but it's like, even so, things were set up, and it's like, I actually believe they know what they're doing. And after seeing so many shows where it just keeps going and they're scrambling to throw things on and adding to the lore and the mythos, and like, just, it doesn't make sense anymore.
Especially since you can do more than more with less. I put up on Twitter last night that I am just so thrilled that after all this overdone CGI Disney, Marvel, Disney, Star Wars stuff, Steve Martin destroyed everybody with a patter song.
That whole sequence
Yeah.
was just gold, with like the way they cut the screen to show different things going on,
and the way the lyrics tied in, but the fact that it was this build of him struggling to get this admittedly very difficult song.
Oh yeah.
This might be the most difficult patter song in history. But it was so simple. Guy trying to learn the words to a play, but it was so gripped with drama. And it just shows you don't have to make these big stories all the time in fantastic worlds. I mean, a lot of Witcher stories are very simple. A lot of Conan stories are kind of simple. The stakes are usually higher, but when it's, he's just, when he's running with thieves and cutthroats, pretty simple.
And I mean, there are a lot of these cosmic horror elements to Conan's stories, where it's like, oh, here's a giant snake, here's this sorcerer that's been in a tomb for 3,000 years, and now he's back to take over the world.
Yeah.
But it's like, even if you were to do those, a lot of it could be done with practical effects and minimal CG.
But the motivations are understandable. The stories are ones you can get your arms around.
Mm-hmm.
It's the difference between when the Mandalorian was about one dude and his little green buddy, you know, and now it's reclaiming a homeland with a prophesied mystical, I don't know what Bo-Katan is, but that there's an example of a woman in leadership that didn't have to be presented as badly as it was.
And for me, it's like, I think myself and a lot of people expected Din to become this kind of Aragorn figure.
Yeah.
Like, he didn't want to be king, but he's proven that he is the most Mandalorian of the Mandalorians.
Well, he is willing to question doctrine and
Mm-hmm.
break rules when it makes sense. And that is a good leader. And that's why I was so surprised when they pulled the girl boss shit. And it's the Filoni waifu effect. They're doing the same thing with Sabine and I know people love Sabine. I know people think Sabine's great, but the predictable consequences of actions don't happen. They don't have that real world thing of when you make a challenging decision, people will not be okay with it. And people will rebel against you. People will betray you. People will try to paint you as the bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know of any woman in a position of leadership where she made a tough call and a whole bunch of dudes went, "You have my sword." I don't, it's a bunch of people telling you why you were wrong. And you either have to go buy or you have to make a whole ton of concessions to appease people because they will not follow chain of command.
And here's the thing, we've always seen Star Wars as a world where no one questions women in power.
Right. Well,
We
except for
had
Leia.
Well, we had Leia, we had Mon Mothma, we
Well,
have
they kind of gave Padme a hard time.
Padme was 14 when she was elected queen.
Yeah, but she had some setbacks in the Senate.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's this is a world where it was set up that women can have power. So
Yeah.
the fact that they are now trying to comment on modern sensibilities, so to speak, it's like in Once Upon a Time where we saw Regina was queen, Snow was the heir.
Mm-hmm.
No one said anything about this, but suddenly Merida is complaining about patriarchy in the Enchanted Forest.
Yeah, what the hell?
And I'm going, that's not the world you set up, you incompetent morons.
Yeah, that they brought in that whole Camelot thing, I guess, to shift it. But at least Once Upon a Time, the show is sympathetic to Regina, who has had to do some shit because she didn't have absolute power. She clawed and scraped her way to the top. And I think the reason everybody wanted her to have happiness is because you saw her struggle, you saw her fail, you saw her make mistakes, but you kind of understood why she did it.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't have those stories of women making mistakes and unpacking why, and this is the failure with a lot of the Game of Thrones characters, we don't Lena Headey does her best with Cersei, but a lot of Cersei's motivations are because any mother loves her children and I'm crazy.
Was that any mother loves her children in the books?
Cersei, we do not get Cersei's inner point of view because point of view characters are a major dynamic in Song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah.
We don't get inside her point of view until she's already mad.
Mm-hmm.
So there is this sort of assumption in the whole Game of Thrones thing that typically performing women, meaning not Arya, not Brienne of Tarth, want babies and want a husband, and they don't really assign motivations as to why. And I think you're supposed to infer a lot of stuff, but they've kind of messed that up with I'm so bad at all the names in House of the Dragon. But they're continuing that weird paternity matters when the mom's a Targaryen.
Yeah, that's the one where it's like no one should give a fuck who the father of Rhaenyra's children are.
No, it doesn't matter. She's a Targaryen. Everybody knows she's a Targaryen.
Yeah, and I've seen people try and compare, but no one. People said Cersei's children didn't belong on the throne. Cersei wasn't a ruler.
Right. She was a Lannister. She wasn't a Baratheon. Yeah.
Yeah, she wasn't the queen. She was queen only by marriage, and just the lack of understanding when it comes to how court politics works. I picked up a book recently where it's a fantasy romance, and like all these different fairy kingdoms are getting together, and it's the yearly games, but all the rulers are going to have their yearly council meetings separately and leaving their heirs and the nobility to celebrate the games and have fun. And I'm like, okay, you're just getting the kings and queens away so this one girl can get kidnapped. I know what's going to happen in this story, but I'm like, that's not how this works.
Yeah, the other thing about I mean, there's an air of inevitability in House of the Dragon that they're kind of locked into. But the idea that, and again, I forget all their names, the friend, Alicent, the idea that they just naturally fight over the status of their children instead of going, look, we've been friends forever. Let's work this out. The assumption that
and the fact that Rhaenyra presented the perfect solution.
Yep.
Marry my son to your daughter.
Yep. Problem solved.
Yeah.
Yep. Problem solved. But
which it's like, what does it say about their opinion of women that Alicent would be so petty?
Well, if I thought they were deliberately telling a story about men blaming women for the bad decisions of men, I think the show was brilliant. But the fact that we know that Alicent was conceived as like a woman for Trump, I can't do that.
And it's like, we can say, oh, that's how the actress was played it. She refused to do that, which is good for her.
Good call, right call,
The fact that anyone in the production, it's like what I was saying with Bo-Katan, is you can't have, if let me try and put the words together.
Yeah, this is a tricky one to explain, isn't it?
So if you can't have, if you are trying to comment on modern day issues, you cannot have an unquestioned female leader.
You also can't have a born hero. You can't have a woman who is, the armorer is like, oh, you're the prophesied one or whatever. There's this mystical element explaining why she's the person, even though she's been a screw up all the way back to Clone Wars.
I mean, let's address the fact that the Mandalorians are really big on family. They don't care if it's adopted or not. The fact she betrayed her sister, I feel like that should disqualify her from anything.
I'm sorry, anybody who thinks Darth Maul is a bigger threat than Count Dooku has terrible judgment. That's just, he's ugly. That's kind of space racism.
he's also completely nuts. And like there are some
Well,
cases
yeah, that too.
where yes, someone who is absolutely mad can be dangerous in their own way.
But Dooku is so slimy. He was slimy from the beginning. I mean, the idea that she thought he was the dude to back against your own damn family. And
Yeah.
it's so weird that I know there was a lot of hate for Satine. And this is going to
Mm-hmm.
confuse the shit out of people. Satine Kryze, Bo-Katan's sister,
Mm-hmm.
love interest to Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Mm-hmm.
Different from Sabine Wren, purple-haired girl in Rebels and Ahsoka. And it just Satine was trying to prevent war.
Mm-hmm.
She was right. That's the right instinct. Just because she failed didn't mean the effort was wrong. And I have so many, I don't know what to call them anymore, because it's not really fans. The people who are incredibly over personalized,
Mm-hmm.
I say, because I don't think it's possible to be over invested in this stuff.
The over-invested consumers.
Nah, it's the people who can't, they are so attached to their version of things that they can't see another side.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, uh potential character flaws are interesting to me, and I'll try to talk about it. It's very clear I've just insulted someone's waifu and this cannot stand.
That's the theme of this month, apparently.
Well, it's there is a thing about fantasy, aspirational fantasy versus how people react to things in reality.
Mm-hmm.
And as someone who, because of the characters I cosplayed, would literally have guys be like, can you, step on my face? Can you put me in a headlock? Can you do this? And then to see how they behave with real women, it's striking. The part of the fun of cosplay is to see how it changes people's behavior,
Mm-hmm.
at least for me. And the number of I'll say people, because it's not just men, women do it too, that they worship a type of character in media, and then they treat the people who resemble that in the real world like such complete dog shit.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it's how, why, we see what people say they want, and then we see how people behave, and often it doesn't match.
No.
And the interesting thing about the whole like trad thing is that you're right, it does seem like both trad women and trad men want the apparent perks of that sort of 1950s that never existed attitude,
Mm-hmm.
without accepting the trade-offs and the responsibilities that come with that very complementarian gender system.
Mm-hmm.
A guy wants a wife that's submissive and supportive and obedient and stays at home and takes care of the kids, but he doesn't recognize that the trade-off to that is you have to be a trustworthy man. You have to be reliable, and you have to be dependable, and you have to let that if the woman's domain is the home, then it is her domain.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually have friends who actually do run that way. That they're very Christian, and when it comes to decisions about the home, he defers to her because that's her job, and he treats it like her job, and that is actual tradition, right?
And one thing I loved about the Pixar movie Brave, a lot of people write it off because whatever.
I didn't get
But
that. I thought Brave was fine.
it And you have Queen Eleanor, who's played by Emma Thompson,
Yeah.
and you see she is the one who keeps that kingdom running.
Yeah.
Like in this particular case, her husband is a lovable idiot.
Mhm.
So she has to make sure things happen. But even traditionally in that era, the woman did run the home.
Mhm.
And it's like the king goes off to war, the king is dealing with issues of state. She has to. I said this when we were talking about the woman of valor.
Mhm.
She makes sure everyone is clothed. She makes sure there's enough food. She makes sure that the castle can run.
Yeah.
And it's like that was something a lot of people miss in the story of Brave is, oh, Merida is so childish, she doesn't want to get married. Well, it's not just about getting married, it's she has to become her mother because she'll have to run a house.
It's interesting because when we jump over to anime, one of the characters that the sponsor wanted us to talk about, and we're not experts on this property, so I'm only going to touch on this, but it's Bloody Reina from 86. And she's one of those examples in anime of a demanding, tough, competent leader,
Mm-hmm.
and she's another one long distance like Anya Stroud. But Japanese culture is not great to women, real Japanese real life culture,
Mm-hmm.
right? um but anime manages to create these really nuanced characters that are not one thing, because Lena's she's very tactical and she's very tough and she's very smart, but she has this kind of naivety.
Mm-hmm.
Like she doesn't understand how to win friends, and they make a point that because she's trained this way, she doesn't have traditional feminine skills, like
Mm-hmm.
sewing is the example. It's like, how can the Japanese, because there are so many examples of characters like this in anime. You know, Mikasa in Attack on Titan is an example of somebody who Aaron treats her like shit, but she is such a loyal friend. And, there's a lot of really interesting women in anime. And it's not because Japanese culture is especially great that way.
Well,
It's
I mean,
because,
even in Japan, it is still customary that when a man gets paid, he doesn't even get his check anymore.
yeah,
It's not bring the check home to the wife. No, nowadays it's deposited directly into his wife's account.
yeah, but
And then,
also women aren't getting married in
true.
Japan the same way because the household burdens are
Mhm.
so intense. Like, why? Why would I bother? And
And it's also that a lot of men aren't getting married because it's why would I work so hard for have a family and kids I almost never see, but then come home to a wife
right,
who's like, I need you to do this, this, and this
that
on my
yeah,
one day off.
yeah, Japan's really gotta address its work culture for social. I mean, okay, you could say that about North America as well in other ways, but the point is, this is not because Japan is some superior society in the real world. It's because creators are allowed to create without this top-down committee
Mm-hmm.
giving them all these boxes they need to check. And I do think that, I mean, the way a lot of Western fandoms attack any woman in authority at a media company, you'd think that would inspire some stuff in the work. And yet the very own work that, Star Wars fans are constantly shitting on Kathleen Kennedy, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, they keep churning out these stories of women who everything is just handed to.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't seem to see the problem. And I'll tell everybody for what the problem is if anybody is sitting there going, what is the problem? There's this thing in female socialization, feminine socialization, I should say, because this is not innate. I strongly believe this is taught.
Mm-hmm.
That you're either innately good at things, you have innate abilities, or you don't.
Mm-hmm.
These are not things you can get better at. And it causes a lot of women to quit way too early because I'm not good at this, you know? Whereas as men, you see the stories of again and again and again, trying, failing, trying, failing, trying, failing. And we root for them. But God, how many in a row now have we had that just, well, she screws up a ton. There doesn't seem to be very many consequences for it. I mean, Rey ultimately ended up as a glorified trophy for Kylo Ren. He was the one with the arc.
Mm-hmm.
It was another who am I story.
That whole it
Oh, I'm excited for what's coming now.
I am the Rey and Kylo thing, it's pandering to fans.
You think so?
Like, because it's the only thing I can think, because the fans were so big on it.
Okay.
And it doesn't make sense in this. Oh, what am I saying? Nothing in those stories makes sense in that trilogy. But it feels like they just saw, okay, so the vocal fans want this, so we'll give them what they want, and we're just gonna shove in a kiss. And it's their whole dynamic is so toxic.
Oh,
and
so
it's so bad. It's so Tumblr fandom.
Is that what it is?
Yes.
Okay, that explains a few other things for me too then.
Yeah, Tumblr loved Kylo and Rey. And I mean, I was over here like, I had a few theories of who Rey might be that I was interested in. I either wanted her to be Han and Leia's kidnapped daughter that they'd never been able to track down.
That would have been cooler than what they did.
Or, I know, right? Or then I actually had the idea that, at some point when Obi-Wan was on Tatooine, he met a female smuggler.
Yeah.
They connected. Things happened. She went off, but what he didn't know was she was pregnant, and then the child she had ended up having a daughter who got stuck on Jakku, and thus Rey would be a Kenobi.
I would have been better with that.
I know, right? Like, that would have been something.
Well, because people pointed out that the whole strike me down and I'll become more powerful than you can ever imagine never went anywhere.
I mean, I think look, what Obi-Wan was supposed to survive that movie initially, but George realized he didn't have anything to do with him for the rest of it.
Right.
So he's like, okay, I'll just kill him. But then they got to Empire Strikes Back and he's like, fuck, now I need a new mentor. And thus we got Yoda, which
that's gone better.
That's got some interesting places. We now have Grogu, so that's a plus for society as a whole.
But I mean, if it was, the idea of sacrifice in Star Wars used to matter.
Yeah.
And they wrecked that recently, but I'm not going to get into it because it's a spoiler.
And it's like, I think the idea was supposed to be that now he was one with the Force, he could always be with Luke and give him advice.
Well, that's where I thought it was going.
Yeah, but it's like, even that just, okay, shows up as a Force ghost a few times. Alec Guinness was smart enough to get paid, even though he hated that gig.
Yeah.
But it's, there were so many interesting things they could have done with Rey.
And it just seemed like it's the same problem with so many female blank things,
and
right?
here's the thing. The idea of Rey as a Palpatine, you could do something interesting with that, but the story was not set up in a way for
No,
that to work, because the
no.
idea, I mean, I know a lot of people are grossed out by the idea of Palpatine having sex. Understandable.
Sure.
But it's like he could have already had a kid on Naboo.
And who says it was sex? They did a lot of a lot of experiments with genetics.
Yeah.
But that's
And so
bringing in Old Republic canon, and
but
technically that's not there, yeah.
the idea of Palpatine having a kid, and the, I mean, we know I love political interplay
Yeah,
and political scheming. So the effect that would have on the Imperial court,
sure.
and then having that son, I think it was, grow up and be like, I'm not going to be like my father, and deciding to just run away and get away from it all. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Like, you can absolutely do something with that story, but the way they set it up with the, oh, you're nobody, your kids were, your parents were nobody, oh no, wait, you're a Palpatine, make up your minds. But it didn't work.
The other issue there is that, when we get into, because the Star Wars has seemed to miss the fact that the Jedis were sort of symbolic leaders in their day, and Luke's journey. Luke Skywalker has a profound character arc in episodes 4, 5, and 6.
And I think that's what a lot of the complaints about Rey were trying to put into words.
And did it badly.
And they did it badly because, and people were just saying, she doesn't struggle. She doesn't have to train. She has all this power. And yes, Luke had all that power as well, but he didn't know how to use it.
Well,
and so
Luke didn't do a ton of training. What he did do is have to struggle with morality a lot.
Yes. And I think so. A lot of people, what they were trying to say when they said that was, she doesn't have an arc. She just is as a character. She's
tortured a lot in that last movie.
Yeah, but it's just, oh, who am I? I have an answer. Oh wait, turns out that answer's wrong. I'm more important than I thought.
Yeah.
It wasn't anything. And so of course when people were like, well, she didn't have to struggle, which she didn't really. She had even less training than Luke. We see Luke kind of messing around with this power that he has until Yoda is able to give it some focus.
Yeah, I mean, Anakin Skywalker had no training in the first movie, so
yeah, it's like he had raw power, but it's like we weren't seeing Anakin lift a ton of rocks without training.
The why should I care factor isn't there in all of these characters. With Leia, you cared because in some ways it was just Carrie Fisher being amazing. There was something just raw about her.
There was also just the basic understanding, white princess, black knight. We know who we're supposed to care about.
Also, though, she's a princess, but she's also the leader of a rebellion. People, the title, the whole general thing really frosts me because Leia, wasn't somebody who had military training. Leia's force powers were her ability to get people to fight, believe in a cause.
Leia was also the youngest senator in the history of the Republic. The only, and that record had previously been held by one Padme Amidala.
Yeah. But she was smart. She was sassy. She was imperfect. She took risks. She did stuff. We were given reasons to like her, not just because she was the girl.
And she had personality, which Rey doesn't.
Ray, it's funny because Ray has this manic energy
Mm-hmm.
that it's the difference between when they originally made Star Wars, it was a bunch of people who were super young and didn't have a ton of acting training, but they were stars. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they were naturally stars. They were good. There was an earnestness. Star Wars has now become this celebrity cameo thing.
You know, I just saw a quote from Rita Hayworth recently talking about her movie Cover Girl, where she said, "We didn't know that we were making something that would be
Right,
big, but we knew it would be good because we felt good making it."
right, right. And you can tell when people, I mean, okay, Harrison Ford totally took advantage of Carrie Fisher on those movies. And if that had happened today, it would be considered complete dirtbag behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the because we're in this era of women, we make women interesting by showing what they can endure, because the minute they start making choices, somebody may not like them. It's very hard to create a compelling female leader in that paradigm because it's inherently a state of inertness.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I push back so hard on the assumptions people make. I mean, part of it is, and no slight to people who like Slash, I'm good with it, but the fact that every seemingly close bond in anything has to be sexual is
That
is
is
weird.
that's what bothers me about Slash is it's you can't just have like we even on Tumblr where some of the more sensible people would talk about how toxic masculinity affects men
Mhm.
in that they're not able to talk about their feelings
Yeah,
and they're not able to have close friendships because they can't address these things. But every time we see anything that actually portrays male friendship, oh, they want to fuck.
but they did it with Bo-Katan and the Armorer too. That's why I'm like, what's going on? I mean, first of all, anybody that believes men can't have close friendships has never read a Warhammer novel. But it's all through that stuff.
I
But the fact that they were like shipping the Armorer and Bo-Katan when that was clearly intended to be like a spiritual thing.
mm-hmm.
That and it's not okay. It's not that somebody ships it because back in the day, a lot of us did silly things for shits and giggles, like wouldn't it be funny if, or let's try this and
Mm-hmm.
see how it works. But they start demanding it become canon, and that's when I start going. We talk about gamers being entitled and making demands, but there's an element of interactivity and choice in video games that makes that an easier argument to make, right? Give me the
Mm-hmm.
option, don't make it the only option.
Yeah.
Whereas this, you know, I've told the do it or we riot jokes, but I get the sense that some people are serious about it.
Oh, absolutely.
And the whole idea of headcanon is it's yours. Do what you want with it, but don't make everybody have to eat it. I prefer some characters be left sort of, for lack of a term, slashable instead of trying to throw a love interest at them. Like every time they tried to throw a love interest at one of the guys in Supernatural, it got very, very toxic.
And people are serious about it. And some of it is probably people who are young, but like back in 2013 after Frozen came out, there was this huge thing, and I still see it sometimes, of Elsa from Frozen and Jack Frost from Rise of the Guardians. And
Yeah, yeah.
if people have listened, we all know I wrote Jack Frost and Rapunzel fan fiction, and I was very invested in that. Um, but so the reason for Jack and Elsa was just they both have snow powers and they're both attractive.
Right. I
Which
see the aesthetic.
aesthetically, I get it. And some of the fan art was good. But for me, I would look at their personalities and I go, this is a disaster.
Yeah, aren't they a little too much alike?
They're a little too much alike, but they also both have their traumas would not mesh. They would drag each other down, which is why Jack and Rapunzel work, because she would help bring him out of his depression.
I'm seeing a lot of that though. I admit I'm disturbed by the Asterion Baldur's Gate 3 fan art because it's a lot of hurt comfort stuff. And that fundamentally misunderstands the character. In my opinion, he's probably the best written character in the whole game. The problem is that it takes a lot to unlock that content. And so I guess a lot of people just go, oh, sparkly vampire, jump to conclusions. You're supposed to, you're supposed to judge a book by his cover in his case, and then find out more of his story, which is what a lot of the Baldur's Gate characters used to be like, which jumped into Dragon Age Origins as well. And that's been totally drained out of anything even remotely connected to that. So it was nice to see at least a few characters get that treatment in the game.
So it's like that meme, you must be a level 5 friend to unlock my tragic backstory.
Well, some of it is you actually have to be romantically involved with him. And a guy I was talking to about it was like, I wish we could just be bros. Because there's a bit of a feeling of perpetuating the abuse. And, when someone has been denied autonomy, sex is this really thorny thing. And we're really not good at dealing with that, because the only people who can write that effectively are people who have been through it and healed from it, which, I mean, that second part immediately eliminates a lot of people because that's a lifelong struggle. And somebody on that game dug real deep. There's a real insider perspective there. And I've been really challenged in that game because the whole idea of you have so much power as the party leader in that game. And I'm playing as, well, I'm using they them pronouns because I wanted to try it out, but I'm using a female physical form tiefling. I just thought it looked cool as a bard. I found the male characters kind of boring looking, and the picking your dick just totally weirded me out. You have a choice of 3 different models. All right. But the choices of you can tell a character to completely change their class. So change them from Shadowheart's the one a lot of people respec, to keep her on her feet, give her some more hit points as a war priest instead of a trickery domain cleric.
Isn't that god modding?
Well, that's the thing. In a pen and paper role play, you don't do that to other people's characters.
Yeah.
And considering you're dealing with themes of agency and autonomy, and you can literally mind read, and you struggle with the morality of that, and different characters feel different ways about it. The fact that you've got a Githyanki, Lae'zel, who's a former, the Githyanki were slaves to the Illithids. You've got a former fighter in the Blood War in Karlach. You've got Astarion, who's got a fucked up history. You've got Will. Like, it's all questions of agency, right? Demonic possession, cult membership. The fact that you're forcing a major life change on your party members has been bothering me a lot. And I don't know if it's deliberate. If that was deliberate, well done, Larian. Because I remember playing Dragon Age Inquisition and being really pissed off at the game because, the Iron Bull, the big Kunari guy,
Mhm.
was bragging about his sexual exploits with the kitchen elves. And I'm running this Skyhold, this fortress. And so I put my boss hat on and go, all right, he says it, but he's big and strong, and they're teeny little delicate elf girls. I'm going to go to the kitchen and I'm going to ask them. Of course, I go to the kitchen. There's no elves in the kitchen. There's nobody in the kitchen. The kitchen is empty. I'm like, BioWare, of all fucking companies, forces me to be complicit in potential sexual harassment. And as someone who has to be the fucking villain of the week, stopping sexual harassment as an employer, that enraged me. Because we talk a good game, but we don't actually do it when it matters. Everybody's like, oh, it's bad. We need to respect women. We need to do this. We need to accept women in positions of authority. The people who are the loudest about that shit are the absolute worst when it's their turn.
Oh, yeah.
Almost without a doubt. I've worked for some guys who identify as conservative, and they were much better with pushback.
In general, people who are, I'm going to say, actual conservatives, not extremes, but they tend to be more merit-based.
Well, economic conservatives primarily care about making money. So if you can make them money, they'll put up with your attitude. They don't care. You make them money. They expect you to be a big personality.
Yeah.
You get into these, hierarchical, I don't even know what you call them, because this is when the left gets real messy. When they want no one to be in charge, that means whoever is the biggest manipulator ends up being in charge. But you get into these things where, oh, don't raise your voice. Don't get upset. I had a guy call me unhinged this morning because I was like, I don't care if you flatter me. What you're doing is wrong. I don't care if you like me, if you're going to be cruel to other people.
Mm-hmm.
And unhinged is up there with bitchy now and annoying. It's just something they throw at more women than men. They do it to men, but again, the threshold's higher.
Yeah.
Men are allowed to be annoying. Martin Short's character, pretty much every character Martin Short has played, is deliberately annoying. But Oliver Putnam, that's the point,
He made it work so well.
Well,
and
because
for those who don't know, it's Martin Short and Only Murders in the Building.
Yeah, Oliver Putnam's the name of the character. And there's an example of a character who they identify as a narcissist, and he actually behaves like a narcissist.
He even called himself a narcissist this season.
Which is why I'm a little worried for Loretta, Meryl Streep's character.
I mean,
I don't know if he's actually, if he actually has feelings for her or whether he just wants to get his play done.
I think he does. But I mean,
in that way that it's attached to the play.
Yeah. It's kind of like
he's doing the Kenneth Branagh, Helena Bonham Carter behind Emma Thompson's back thing.
I feel like it's kind of like the guy Mabel was seeing in season 1, Oscar, her childhood friend who'd been accused of murder.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that, where she's there this season. Whatever happens, we know she's not going to be in season 4.
Right, because they can't keep her. I mean, you never know on that show. People come back, but
true. But yeah, it's I am so curious to see how the last few episodes go.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be out by the time people are listening to this, so that's why I didn't mind spoilers. But yeah, there's an example of a guy, that character is a narcissist.
Mhm.
And he's deliberately written as a narcissist. And unfortunately, so many modern female leaders end up reading narcissistic because unfortunately they're written by men that don't stop and think, okay, the world doesn't read the same way.